Well, almost as a testament to the way the news has been, we've got gloomy, gray overcast skies here in Texas, and this is a altostratus layer up at about 15,000 feet, and down below it on the horizon, you can see a little bit of stratocumulus down a lot lower, about 2,000 to 2,500 feet. And what we're seeing is a combination of a lot of moisture coming from the subtropics in the mid-levels and the return of tropical air from the Gulf. So taking a look around the southwest U.S., we've got a cold front moving through just past the Las Vegas area there, stretching through Southern California, and that's gradually oozing southward into Arizona. Across the Central Plains, we've got a pretty strong cold front coming down. That air has its origins from Alberta and Saskatchewan, and back behind it, temperatures are in the 20s and 30s. Definitely on the cold side for April. And down in Texas, we see the appearance of a dry line. That's more like what we would expect this time of year, and that runs from about Clinton down to Abilene and down to the San Angelo, Dryden area of Texas. Back behind it, you can see the temperatures are in the 80s, but with very dry dew points, 20s and 30s. And out ahead of it, we've got the dew points coming up into the 60s. So yeah, the return flow coming up from the Gulf is wide open, and along with it, marginal VFR ceilings coming in. And there's how it looks there in Texas. A lot of overcast moving through the state. You can see the subtropical jet right there coming up from northwest Mexico. And if we switch over to the water vapor imagery, there it is, moisture coming up from Mexico. It's kind of interesting. We can also see some gravity waves out there in Colorado and New Mexico, probably a little bit bumpy for airplanes flying through that area. And we also see an area of subsidence in New Mexico. See the drier shades there, the bluer colors. That's going to be downward vertical motion working on that area. And just to bear that out, here's the 500 millibar heights and vorticity. And there you see some values there indicating anticyclonic vorticity. Probably the departure of these short waves in Oklahoma and Texas has left us with some subsidence on the backside there. And there may be some jet stream interactions working that area too. Most of the heavier lift this evening is up in Wyoming, north central Colorado, and western South Dakota. So all in all, this is pointing to the jet coming onshore around Eureka, coming through the Utah area, and then back up to the Dakotas, kind of like that. And down to the south, picking up some indications of the subtropical jet, just about like that there. Of course, we really have to go up to 200 millibars to pick that out. And there it is. Full force, 100 to 110 knots in that subtropical jet. So if you're flying from New Orleans to LA, you're going to have to add some time to that flight for sure. In the southeastern U.S., we got that stubborn high pressure. This is the remnants of that old polar air that was over Canada. It's just kind of spread out, kind of like when you come home from work and you just kind of sink into the couch and your body goes everywhere. It's kind of what's happening with the air mass there. All that cold air is spreading out. And this is kind of a transition air mass between continental polar, sure is hard to write with a mouse, transitioning over to maritime tropical as we get some of that loiter time over the warmer terrain and some trajectories going out over the Gulf. And that's given us some of the maritime tropical air flowing there into Texas. So it's a transitional air mass, and that's why I have not assigned it an air mass category. And then down there in Florida, they're also seeing the transition with easterly winds at this time. That'll be gradually coming around to the southeast over the next day. In the north central plains, we've got that front coming into Minnesota. And you notice the isobar analysis, which is automated, did not really pick out that low. You see it there in west central Minnesota. There is a low there, See, we go from 1011.8 down to 1011.3. So there's certainly something in here, but looking at the distribution of the wind flow, I might have to put it in here. So let's draw that analysis. So this is kind of what I'm seeing. Frontal system there in west central Minnesota. And out ahead of it, there's that massive high pressure covering the Great Lakes area. And then we've got that outgoing storm spinning around there in the Atlantic Ocean, helping to accelerate the winds in New England and giving them kind of a blustery day with northerly winds. And there's the weather picture in the northwestern U.S. There comes all that cold air just screaming southeast out of Canada. Temperatures down to 16, and that's without the wind chill there in Bismarck, and all the way down to 10 degrees in Montana. Yeah, definitely does not feel like spring there at all. And then that old boundary that we had out around the Bitterroot Range, the mountains near Yellowstone. Not sure what mountains those would be, kind of in this area. I need to brush up my geography a little bit. But that's helping to block a lot of that cold, shallow air. And then we're kind of left with this kind of stagnant polar air, maritime polar air, over Oregon and Washington. And there's just a quick look at the unsettled weather we have in the central U.S., all that stratus, stratocumulus, and a little bit of high cloud. Did you see that there? Kind of those streaks going like that. That's the cirriform clouds and maybe some mid-level altocumulus and altostratus kind of moving northeast with a jet on top of that deck of low cloud where we have isentropic lift helping to generate that cloud layer. Plus it's a somewhat humid air mass. Then out over the northwestern U.S., some cumuliform clouds indicating upper-level instability. It looks like a little bit of fog there trapped in the valleys of the high desert area of Oregon and Idaho. Kind of a very cool day for this time of year for sure. I remember when I worked at Tonopah, which was, it was down in this area right here. Usually in April we were looking at 70s, fair weather, occasionally some Pacific systems moving through, but north winds were really not all that common. Usually we were transitioning into summer at that point. Now, one of the things that I sometimes track are Hofmoeller diagrams, and this kind of gives us a look at the flow throughout the entire hemisphere. This runs all the way from Europe to Asia to North America and then back to Europe, so it kind of circles the globe there. And this is in the mid-levels, and it looked like out in the Pacific we had this very strong ridge and trough couplet there that is gradually broken up, probably amplified and kind of dissipated there, and that's kind of broken up the flow into a whole bunch of troughs and ridges, and I'm counting maybe, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 waves. So we're back in a progressive pattern. And there's how things look right now. They're at 300 millibars. So let's see, let's count them off. 1 long wave, that's cut off out in the Pacific. 2, maybe 3. That's either 3 or 4 or 5, and then maybe, 6. So 5 or 6 long waves. And if we run that forward, you can see that there is definitely progression of the patterns. So it looks like we're not going to be seeing a whole lot of blocking out there in the Pacific after this. We should get a series of troughs and ridges moving in. And let's see, let's go back and run that one more time. Starting out, there's that long wave trough on the west coast, ridging across the Great Lakes, and we run that forward. Looks like another cutoff low there in California, but you see this ridge building in, and the troughs kind of shift eastward. Yeah, it seems like there's this tendency for troughing to just kind of lock in there over North America, so that should keep us on the cool side for the next couple weeks. But boy, yeah, some very strong ridging, and that might send some more cold air southward into Canada. That's probably helping to augment some of that troughing. And then we get pretty good zonal flow off the Pacific around the middle of the month. And I think as things gradually start warming up, we're going to see, especially with this wave and maybe the next one coming in, that'll probably start ramping up the chances for storms. It's kind of hard to get storms going when you got all this cold air moving south across the U.S. It pushes all the moisture back out into the deep Caribbean, and it doesn't make it right back up. But you can see there towards the end we get this really long fetch of zonal flow. That's dynamically unstable, and I would expect to see that break up very quickly into ridges and troughs and possibly reestablish a blocking pattern out there in the Pacific. So that could bring an end to the progression of these waves from east to west. So all in all, that means probably a little bit unsettled, kind of cool much of this month, and then we'll have to see after that. Maybe we'll get into kind of a, I don't know, it depends on where the ridges and troughs end up towards the end of this month. Anyway, just some stuff to look at there. So there's our chart for tonight. The big story, of course, is all that cold air coming south into the Great Plains. Also a big chunk of cold air coming into Utah and Nevada. And of course we got that dry line out over Texas, but we're either capped or, I don't know, we'll take a quick look out there and see if we're missing out on storm potential. Now, of course, I can just cheat and look at the HRRR model. And I know the dry line is out there in the Abilene area. And let's see. This is probably elevated convection associated with that moist air advection and warm air advection into the I-35 corridor. That's not dry line activity. And the dry line stays shut down. Let's see where that stuff initiates. It's right around Temple. And let's go over to the dew point. One thing that's cool about the dew point is you're going to be able to see that initiation happen. That's why I really like these products quite a bit. Okay, starting out, current time, yep, there's the dry line from about Quanah down to Abilene and Dryden. And you can see that moisture surging up towards the Austin and Dallas area. And yeah, I can see a little bit of a cold pool right there from some of that convection. But that's deep into the moist advection, so that's not dry line activity. But the dry line is around Childress. Very nice triple point this evening, right around that area, but we're lacking something to get those storms going. Otherwise, you know, this would be a great chase day. In fact, look at that overnight. Dry line recedes westward with all that strong warm air advection. And then, of course, we have the cold front sinking out of Oklahoma and the Panhandle. So what's stopping the storms? Let's go back to the peak heating, 22Z. We'll set that over the area where we might want to be camped out chasing. This is going to be around Vernon, Texas. And we'll look at the forecast sounding. And there we go. Some problems, well, a little bit too capped. Also, the moisture has not had time to really establish itself. See how it kind of tapers off, the green line right there? Yeah, right there. Kind of tapers off. It doesn't have much height on that. So that means you very quickly get into 50s as you get off the ground there. And what does that mean when we mix the parcel? We're going to be using probably a line way over here. And let's drop that down dry adiabatically to get the convective temperature. So we really need to be reaching about 88 degrees Fahrenheit to break that cap. I would say it's probably still doable. If I was chasing, I'd probably want to hang out just in case. Certainly some great cape. What does the hodograph look like? Well, there's some 0 through 1 kilometer shear. The lack of backing at the surface would concern me. See how that zero vector is way up there towards the top left of the diagram? I want to see that more down here. So that way when I do the hodograph, I get more of a shape that's kind of like a hook. So sometimes it's better to have kind of weaker winds at the surface, kind of more easterly. That can help you complete that hook. And then when you use the storm motion vector, you sweep out a lot larger area. So I don't know, this is kind of iffy as far as tornado potential. And let's look at the satellite one more time. Okay, there's the northwest Texas area. Got some heating there. Sun is breaking through, but we are getting an increase in the mid-level cloud. That's kind of problematic. Then we advance it up to the current time. Wow, yeah, that mid-cloud really fills in. I guess there's some good mid-level lift working on that area. That could, destabilize the cap, remove the cap a little bit. In fact, there's some cumulus elements back here indicating mid-level lift approaching. So I would not completely rule out that area. And looking very quickly at SPC, they've got the best potential up in Oklahoma, actually, further up the front. They're not really looking for stuff to break out there around Childress. So it looks to me like they're going for that enhanced convergence along the frontal boundary right there. But personally, I would want to be closer to this triple point along Highway 287. Now, speaking about chasing, I haven't really kept up too much with social media, but I've talked to Jason Persoff. I know a lot of you are familiar with him. He's the chase doctor. I talked to him last week, and he had concerns about chasers being out there on the plains and kind of helping to increase the spread of this virus. So that could be a good reason to not be out there chasing. But, people will do what they do. So I'm not going to, get in the middle of all that. Personally, I thought about going out and chasing just, for the fact it's the year of the big virus. And, you always want to go out there and see what happens. But after reading what Jason said, yeah, I would agree. It's probably not the best idea. And we've got all this great remote sensing data where you can just kind of keep tabs on things as it happens and switch over to the radar. So armchair chasing is certainly a thing. And I kind of like being connected better with the data. It's kind of hard to do that when you're out in the field. So back to our maps. We did get kind of off track there, but that cold air is going to sink south into Texas very rapidly. Showers breaking out with that strong warm air advection. A little forcing along the front, and that gives us some little clusters of storms in East Texas and around the San Antonio area. Then for tomorrow, cold front is, yeah, that's just a big old cold front all the way up to Manitoba. I'm not sure where the warm front is. Probably just way up there. And I think there's probably a new warm front developing in this area here. You can see some packing there of the thickness contours. 1028 millibar high coming down. That's that blob of cold air. It looks like we're already starting to get some return flow becoming established around New Mexico and Colorado. Then that other frontal boundary up in this area here. There it is. For Saturday evening, it looks like things get stormy once again there in California. Big cutoff low there on the northwest coast. Texas is under the influence of that cold air that's just sunk all the way down to the mountains of Mexico, and we're starting to get that return flow. Easterly flow usually means cloudy weather in Texas, especially when it's happening aloft, when you get that isotropic lift over the dome. That's helping to produce some of those showers there in Houston. And this whole area out all the way out to West Texas would be cloudy. And then for Sunday night, high pressure across the Great Lakes. That warm front lifts north through Texas right there. Looks like more cold air trying to come down from Manitoba. There's the leading edge of that. A lot of it is being rerouted to the southwest into Montana. And that system there in California really coming together. Look at those heavy snows being indicated over the Sierra Nevadas. We talked yesterday about the Donner Party. This is kind of what I envision them having had to deal with. Something like that there. You can see that cold core low right off the coast and all that instability. Let's take a look at a sounding in Northern California. I put that in an area kind of away from the shower so we don't get contamination of the column. And you can see the steep lapse rates there going from 50 degrees. And that's during the afternoon. That's very cool for this time of year. And it goes steep lapse rate all the way up, and the column is humid. So a lot of chances there to release that instability. This is usually what we see around those cold core barotropic lows, and this is a classic example. And if there's enough heating, you can actually get tornadoes out there in the San Joaquin Valley. It happens. And if you look up one of the chasers, Marty Feely, he used to chase those back in the 90s. And I figure we should make a quick footnote about the virus and the quarantines. I mean, it's the big elephant in the room, and everybody's having to deal with this. Haven't seen a whole lot of ramp up out here in Texas. You know, we're kind of far away from New York. Some of the stuff going on there, but we're not seeing much mask usage at all. However, the food bank lines are really starting to get long. This is what we saw out there earlier today. These are all people trying to get donated food. So I think the unemployment here is starting to hit pretty hard. The other thing that I'm noting is a lot of these vehicles are late model vehicles, so that makes you wonder if maybe some of this was lack of preparation. I don't know. I don't want to really judge anybody, but that's just how it looks. That's what we saw when we were out there. Yeah, we've been effectively in quarantine since March 10th, and we have not broken that at all. You know, we do go out to get footage, but we keep a far distance from everybody. And some of that drone footage you see, that's at a storage unit. There's nobody around there at all. So that's a good place to go. All right, guys, that's about all I have for this evening. I'll pop up our Patreon donation link right there. It's important that we have your support if you want to continue seeing these webcasts come out. Otherwise, I will have to continue focusing on the software, the books, and the data. That's the problem. It's just not enough hours in the day, and it comes down to voting with your pocketbook what you want to see. And we do have some book projects in the works. Hopefully we'll see some of that come out this summer. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you for watching, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.